I'm Tyler, and this is the AntiSocial Network.
Don't look away. Let the fear wash over you.
Very compelling kind of a figure. Odd-looking duck. There's something about his eyes. Hypnotic.
A racist, a sexist, uncivil, worse than Hitler.
Welcome to your number one source of internet oddity.
This is the main thing about my listeners. They're masochists, and they listen to my show just for the pain.
Here we host conversations with interesting people across the internet.
This idea that hell is a bottomless pit, and that's because no matter how bad it is, some stupid son of a bitch like you could figure out a way to make it a lot worse.
Once I establish my theocracy, I will throw you in my dungeon and let you rot for it.
You haven't heard of them, but I have.
Doctor, turn off my cringe inhibitors.
Join us every Friday for discussions on culture, entertainment, politics, religion, and whatever happens to catch our fancy then.
Oh, my shrink was right. God does hate me.
You could bring civilization to Britain, but you could never bring Britain to civilization.
You globalist cock!
Social credit deducted.
You're probably thinking this is some pretty deep stuff, and you're right.
This week we are joined once again by Lindsey Dunn, the host of one of my stories. I had to remind myself what it was called, but it was she's a very good writer, good friend of the show. How's it going? How you been?
We are underneath a huge rainstorm right now, and that I know I have this backdrop, but it really is raining in Durham. So I was really happy that the power didn't go out and we could actually record. But yeah, I'm great. Had a busy day at work and ready to do something film related.
I like how the audio on my end cut off just as you said, well, we're doing okay so far. Okay.
Oh no.
We are liable to we're still awaiting our first I was joking about this when I had my buddy Joe on a couple weeks ago. There was a tornado warning up in Chicago, or right around the time we were talking, and it's like, this might be the first time we've ever witnessed a death on screen. This could be a very interesting podcast, But it's actually starting to storm out here a little bit too. I heard some thundering on my end, so if there's any sort of latent rumbling, I don't know which end it's on, but it could be either one for all intents and purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of lots of noise, we wanted to discuss two movies that came out this past weekend, that being Jordan Peele's Nope and the Russo brothers' The Gray Man. One being a film and the other one also being a film, drawing lots of interesting and diverse reactions. I guess we'll start with what I think is the more interesting of the two, that being Nope. What did you think of Nope? Because this seems to be drawing completely all over the place reactions.
Yes, it certainly is. I think it's because, Jordan Peele, he's a huge director now. He's only directed 2 movies, but they've both been hits. He grabbed everyone's attention with Get Out, and people practically, I feel like he certainly didn't invent social horror, but he definitely repopularized that concept, and people wanting to examine like social themes through horror. And so when he makes a movie, everybody's interested in what he has to say. And in this case though, with Nope, it's much more of a summer blockbuster story, and so it's not as cut and dry as with Get Out and Us. Both of them had small ensemble casts, and it was sort of more on the nose what he was trying to say. And so in this case, there's more room for interpretation and many themes being examined at the same time. And so it's just, there's a lot more room for disagreement on this one. But I mean, I really liked it. I thought it was a very loud horror movie, not what I expected, because when you think about UFO movies, you always think about, I feel like 80% of it at least is just atmosphere and pretty shots in the eye and contemplative, and we're thinking about what could be out there. And this was much more of an action UFO movie, which I'm not used to. And so for me, that was really unique and unexpected.
Yeah, the go-tos people seem to be describing this too are all the common Spielbergisms, you know, Jaws, E.T., Close Encounters. My go-to comparison with this was Fire in the Sky, which I don't know if you've seen that, but it's one of the other few UFO movies that's just a straight-up horror movie. And it kind of reminded me of that because both movies are... There's like 3 scenes of extreme horror, and then the rest of it's just kind of a downbeat drama about normal people just kind of dealing with the real life consequences of what's happening in the story. And I'm on this. I'm pretty much on the same side as you. I think Nope is very good. It's fascinating watching people have these very divergent reactions, like our greatest film critic Logan Paul, who declared it was too stretched, thematically stretched, whatever that means. But it's because the movies, the social politics aren't quite as obvious. I would have thought this would have gotten a little bit more of a bump from certain people, especially people that were that maybe might not have been as enthused by Jordan Peele's politics in the previous 2 films, but it doesn't seem to have drawn that audience. It just kind of seems to be turning off the same people who didn't like Us and Get Out, and the people that liked Us and Get Out are just salivating over it to the point where Jordan Peele has to go on Twitter and actually tell people to calm down, which has been the most amazing thing I've seen in the last couple of days. I have so much more respect to him knowing that he doesn't think this highly of himself. You know, it's like, oh, I'm just a guy making horror movies. You guys are being weird.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even there's always this, for some reason, critics, I think it's because okay, I'm stumbling all over the place, but critics want to compare product B to product A. So I don't know, for me, the whole comparisons, in some ways it's a good marketing strategy to do that, because you can say, oh, it's like this plus this equals this, had a baby, you know, and that's how you would describe the movie. And those things can be useful for helping people, I guess, decide if it's even a picture they're worth seeing. But to just say, oh, this is Spielberg's Jaws, seems really reductive to me and kind of an insult to people who are artists. They're trying to make unique things. You know, we're going to be talking about The Great Man later, but for people who are trying to make things, making it just a comparison and that's all, can't Jordan Peele be Jordan Peele? You know, maybe some of the things remind us of Jaws, but or other movies, or you mentioned Fire in the Sky, a movie I haven't seen, but it is on my list of things I want to see. I've heard it's actually pretty darn terrifying, but that sort of, like I said, I feel like it's a little reductive when you just compare things from other people. But in you're right, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Well, since it's not as socially woke, quote unquote, maybe it would have a wider appeal. But it could be that people who aren't into that kind of stuff just sort of cross Peele off their list already, and they're like, I'm never seeing anything by him because I don't like that type of movie. And it's kind of, it gets to our need to sort of categorize things. I like this director, I don't like this director. I like these movies, I don't like these kinds of movies. And people, their average moviegoer, I feel a lot of times puts themselves into a certain box, and they're kind of like, well, that's not in my box, and so I will not even look at it or think about going to see it.
I could also see this being somewhat off-putting to the more categorical film nerds who want their genre fiction spoon-fed to them, or they want something that doesn't have, you know, major holes in the story or the logic. And because this definitely feels like a film where it's trying to evoke a feeling more than create a logical bad guy. Because what the actual thing is and how it functions, it's not clear, and it's kind of convoluted and strange. But especially when you try to untangle what it means thematically. But like, if you're the kind of person that's, you know, super off-put by plot holes in Star Wars movies, you're gonna be coming at this from you're gonna be like poking holes in this thing all day long. But as far as just being a horror film goes, I think it works great. I've never seen like a version of a UFO. I guess we're just gonna just straight up spoil. I've never spoil everything, so don't watch past this point if you care about the plot. But I've never seen the idea of you doing a UFO story as just a predatory monster. as in it's not actually full of aliens. It is the alien. That's a really creative idea, and it turns into a really terrifying homage to Akira, which if you've seen Akira, you probably know which scenes I'm talking about. But I like how again, I don't want to be overly derivative and say, oh, it's based on this and this, but Peele is drawing these scenes and just kind of using them as a loose reference point, just as inspiration. And I think he uses them in an original enough way that anyone who's going to see this movie is going to be completely surprised and come in and not realize what kind of movie they're actually getting until it actually happens. Especially when you get to the two big back-to-back scenes at the midpoint of the film, which kind of end up throwing the entire film into its own and making it its own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, were you expecting a more quiet, contemplative film going in, or I was curious how you felt about the loudness of the movie and how expansive it was and big in scope. I mean, did you like those things about it, or?
I did. I like that he's taking more ambition and taking a wider scope of references. Like in my review, I kind of made a big deal of the Western influences because I thought that was kind of a different take on this kind of on all these genres and all these aesthetics that he's used, because there aren't. I've never seen a horror other than like Bone Tomahawk. I haven't seen that many horror westerns, and I haven't seen that many sci-fi westerns. And he seems to be using it to kind of add some extra subtextual flavor to the film and use the imagery in a different way. But I think the fact that it fits together differently makes it work. Like maybe we probably need to get into the two big thematically loaded scenes, because I think those are the ones that ultimately define the film's core, but they're kind of hard to not talk about. Do you know which ones I'm talking about, or?
I don't know.
I think I'd say the two. To me, I think the two biggest takeaway scenes in this movie are the Gordy's scene, the Gordy's home scene, and the
Gordy's home,
and the audience scene. Because would you agree or disagree?
No, I'm not sure what you mean by the audience scene.
Well, when they're in the stadium and they're trying to lure the UFO for all the tourists
Yeah, well, that was certainly the most frightening part for me. But I don't know if I would say those were the key scenes. They were, Gordy's home, definitely. That is kind of at the center of the movie. But we can talk about any of the scenes you want.
Well, what do you think is I guess we kind of, we shouldn't dance around anymore. What do you think the film is trying to say thematically at its core? Because it feels like there's a couple of evocative ideas underneath it, and I'm not exactly sure which one is the dominant one, but there's a lot kind of going on underneath it. What was your primary takeaway on it?
Well, this answer might disappoint you, but I feel like there's a lot of room for interpretation, and that's what's fun about it. But some of the things I picked up on are just the cost of fame and how it impacts everyone, not just the people that are in charge, but the people underneath that are being used in a sense to make things happen. There's a pretty big theme about like animals being used in show business and how you have to be careful about that and not do those kinds of things lightly. And so there's that aspect of how people often don't really count the cost of messing with those kinds of things, and that there's things like horses, and they were supposed to be out in the wild, and instead they're being trained to make people rich instead of getting to enjoy their life, maybe what they would rather be doing. So there's that. There's also a pretty big theme about needing to be on camera all the time and needing to record things, and we can talk about people behind the camera. There's all of our cast are pretty much people that are working behind the scenes instead of the stars, the exception to that being Emerald, who maybe wants to be a star, but you have like the horse trainer, you have a cinematographer, you have a tech guy. So the people that are often not being seen are being seen. So there's so much. So what did you get out of it?
That's the question of the hour. I don't know how it all fully fits together. The best read I've heard on it so far is that it's an examination of trauma and how in our relationship to trauma. Like one of the reviews I found kind of compared the scene where they're in the audience trying to show off the UFO for profit, and they refer to the aliens as the viewers, which kind of felt like a snide little remark. It was like, this is a scene you should be paying attention to, audience. It's like, because it seemed to be kind of implying that, you know, there's an element of perverseness to our desire to be sucked into something traumatic, and our fascination with trauma, and in our relationship to trauma, especially in regards to everything that's happened in the past, you know, 2, 5, 10, 20 years. It just feels like we are kind of at a weird point in society where it's like one traumatic thing happens after another, and it just happens, and our movies explore it in very blasé, strange ways. Excuse me. And it doesn't affect us in ways that we would normally, think to. And in the movie, like, especially, I forget the name of the Stephen Yeun character, but
Jupe.
What's that?
His name is Ricky Jupe.
Oh, Jupe. Okay, yeah, because Jupiter. Yeah. But with, like, Jupe, like, you get the sense that he had this horrific, traumatic experience as a child, and it really messed him up, and it really kind of made it impossible for him to kind of move past it, to the point where he now has to use it to profit off of it, because he makes more, he's kind of a, one of those actors who starts out big and kind of, their career tails off, and now they're managing an amusement park in the middle of the Central Valley because no one wants to work with them anymore. But he ends up there's kind of this sad perversion to how he ends up dying, because he's trying to abuse an animal the same way the Gordy's crew tried to abuse an animal, and in this case it ends up getting 40 people, including him, including his entire family, including his childhood crush with the incredibly depressed, scarred face, literally digested alive by this alien creature they don't understand, and the audience just has to watch it. And as far as like movie deaths go, it's one of the more like unsettling, unseen deaths we've seen on screen in a while, where, especially throughout the entire film, you just hear this, like, anytime the UFO flies by, you just hear these muffled screams, and you're like, okay, what is that? And then finally, when it plants over the house, and you just hear this crushing sound, and all the blood starts pouring out, and you realize, I think 40 people just died, just that 1 second, and then you realize, oh, their innards are spilling over the house, and it's just this, it's all told in suggestion, but the trauma there is just like, it sticks with you. It's in your head. It just makes you imagine it, because actually doing this on screen would probably be too gruesome for even an R-rated movie. It would be just the suggestion is just so much worse, but it just creates this kind of very powerful depiction of trauma in relation to the media, but also the version we're interacting with as an audience, and how we as an audience are perceiving it, because this is obviously, Jordan Peele seems to have found the one traumatic horror that hasn't been explored in Hollywood before, or is rarely explored, because there aren't that many movies about being digested alive. Well,
you don't really know what the mechanics are of what happens. You do know there's horrible screaming. Like, to me, I don't know if that's how you looked at it, but I couldn't really see, and they purposely made it a very small box, so you could only see like half of different people. I couldn't see what was happening to them. I just heard them screaming. You hear the noises, then you see the blood, and so something's happening to them, and then you go, okay, there was all these coins and things were falling, and that seemed really strange before, and then it becomes really horrifying, because it's the I guess the thing can't digest metal objects. I mean, that was interesting. That okay, why can't you can chew on human, you can do something with the human bones and skin, but you can't digest metal objects. That's kind of interesting. But we don't really know they were eaten, right? I mean, we just know that they died and blood came out.
I think it's implied. I mean, someone I read suggested that the innards of the thing had like the digestion system of like a Venus flytrap, which it kind of makes sense with what it's happening, because it only seems to take in organic material and then it just spits out inorganic material and blood. So I'm like, okay, I don't know exactly what it's pulling out, but I would assume it just wants some sort of tissue and not something like of that nature, and it just everything that it can't digest it spits out, which was part of why the horse statue is such a big deal early on, and it just eats the horse statue and it gets pissed off and it goes, and that's why it starts stalking the farm, at least implicitly. But I part of it's kind of confusing though, because I don't fully understand the logic of why the creature only eats what stares at it, which might tie more into the trauma themes, being like, the thing only consumes you if you give it attention, if you give it if you pay it mind, and if you don't do that, it passes by you and it just happens, like the turning off your TV and not paying attention to the news, and you just not acknowledging the trauma, or letting the trauma consume you, is your only power against it. But
it's kind of like when you're with an animal, and if you're with a wild animal, you're not supposed to stare at it in the face, because that's a sign of aggression. So that's, I don't know, that's one way you can look at it, is that it's just the fact that you're being aggressive towards the thing instead of looking away, or hiding. In the case of some people, they hide, they don't, instead of telling the creature, get down and all that. And there's a similar thing with the horse, who's being shot with the camera, don't shine that light in the creature's face, and everybody just ignores it. But it's not always, I think, like we've already said, it's not on the nose. So trying to come up with a compliment for every single thing that happens and say this means X and this means Y, but there is definitely something being said about trauma in the past, and like with stars. But I think there's things being captured on camera, and those things being traumatic, and the need to record those things is definitely touched on somehow. But as far as what the antidote to that is, what are you supposed to do instead? What's the right way to approach it? Yeah, I'm not sure that's clear. Is it just turning off, or like not needing to record everything? And
well, it's an interesting wrinkle that the dramatic finale of the film is whether or not they're going to be able to get a photo of the alien. I mean, because there's this huge setup towards the end where they have to figure out a way to get it on film, but it can't get too close to the house. So they steal all the balloon thing, the wacky inflatable tube guys. And they bring out the guy, the documentarian with the non-electric IMAX camera, and it just turns into this. It's not even like a question of will they defeat the monster, because at one point that kind of becomes clear that's gonna happen, but that just becomes, can we prove the monster exists? Can we prove that this thing that's been haunting our house has been out there in the wilderness? Can we? And there's like logistical questions at the end, like, well, is this photograph that they're going to show on the Oprah Winfrey show actually going to become the Oprah shot, as they say several times at the film? Is this actually going to be proof? And like nowadays, I'm like, the skeptical plotty part of my brain says, it looks like a weird photo of a CGI jellyfish. Like you show that to someone, they'd be like, why did you show me a photo of a weird CGI jellyfish? But for dramatically speaking, though, they've succeeded. They've had their great Western final shot of the guy standing in the doorway having succeeded. It's like dramatically you kind of know, like, okay, they've solved something by taking a photo of this thing, and now they can show the world what it is and what it's supposed to represent to them. So, so I don't know exactly how that fits in with it, but I think you're right. There's a lot of like loose elements that don't really seem like they tie together strictly. Like when we were like, and this probably ties back to the element that we were discussing on Twitter earlier about what was the hardest thing to interpret, that being the shoe.
The shoe.
Yes, the extremely strange floating shoe, or the completely balanced shoe during the Gordy scene. What have you come to any consensus on this, or?
No, I mean the only theme that I saw was the whole like, oh, this is shoe brick. It's a shoe representing Kubrick, so they called it shoe brick. Isn't that cute?
Yeah, that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. It's up there with Logan Paul's review of Nope and of the worst things I've heard in the last 2 days. So
there was some, I don't know, to me there was some logic to it because of the fact that there was a monkey who was being violent and was using this as a weapon, and the obelisk is like a thing that's a vertical thing that's on screen. So yeah, that could be it. But the shoe seemed to me to be pretty, it was there on purpose because it's standing on its end, and if that's not what shoes do. Then later it's in the museum, still standing on its end. And then Daniel Kaluuya at one point says, what if it's not just a shoe? And then when he says that, it goes back to the Gordy's home flashback a second time and shows more of what happened. So I kept thinking, what is the shoe? What is the shoe? Does a shoe represent something, or is it just a prop? And they just made it that way to show how chaotic it was that the shoe landed on its end. Nobody's really talked about it, so maybe I'm making a big deal about nothing. It's like, what do the numbers mean?
I don't think you are. I think it does. The fact that they take the most important scene of the movie thematically, a moment to zoom in on the shoe, I don't think that's trivial. I just don't think that there's a clear analog for what the shoe is like in a literal sense. I don't think it's like, oh, the shoe represents communism. It's like it's something like that. It's not. There's no one-to-one semiotic thing about it. It's just, I mean, if you want to use the 2001 comparison, then, well, if the 2001, the monolith stood for something that's beyond our comprehension, that gives us knowledge that we don't understand, that makes us more than what we are. I mean, but it's not it doesn't, the shape of the thing doesn't matter. It's the fact that what it does is what's symbolically interesting, is that it gives the apes the evolutionary knowledge to become humans. And in this case, it kind of, I guess the shoe kind of marks the transition point in that scene between Jupe watching his fellow actors having their faces torn off, and in the moment when Gordy starts to kind of come out of his blood rage and start approaching him, this like innocent, like trying to connect after all of it, just this, the sense that he wants to whatever spooked him is past. He's back to being normal Gordy, and he does the ET fist bump, and then obviously it ends with the horrifying image of the monkey being shot by the police, which it's all traumatic, but the shoe just kind of marks this. The shoe is just a shoe. The fact that it's standing up on its by its own is just kind of this. And I think it was The Atlantic that said this moment of peace and order in this otherwise chaotic and out of control situation. So the fact that it's doing what it is like a miracle. It's this strange little tiny thing that doesn't make sense in the grander scheme, where you don't understand what it is, but it doing that thing is miraculous. So I don't think there's a direct correlator though.
Or it's a reminder to Jupe of a horrible event, that he keeps. For him, I think it's a symbol of this is what happened to me. And that kind of is, in a way, it's his claim to fame. It could have been him being on that show before, but he's one of our forgotten child actors that is in a movie, and then when they get to be an adult, everybody just makes fun of them and says, remember when they were a cute little kid? So it became a significant reminder to him of that day. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it is just a shoe, but it also, like you said, doesn't necessarily represent something. It's just a powerful prop that made the scene more horrific. I don't know. It could be a symbol of order, but I don't know. I saw it as disorder, like something weird's going on. Why is this shoe standing up? So if somebody had a camera phone back then, they probably would have taken a video of the shoe. Oh, look, it's a shoe, and put it on TikTok and get like 1 million followers.
Hey, the lady just had the skin on her face ripped off. Look at the shoe. Yeah.
I was surprised she was still going out in public or standing.
I mean, it's based on a real life. I mean, have you heard of Travis the Chimp, the actor chimp that ripped off a real woman's face?
No. So was this an event? You're saying the whole thing was based on a real event that happened?
Loosely, yeah. It didn't happen on live television. It happened. There was this family in the early 2000s that owned a chimp, and the chimp was like a local celebrity, and he did television appearances and all that stuff. And then one day he gets taciturn and decides to start beating up his owner's friend, and the woman needed skin grafts to replace all of everything that was torn off on her face, because it basically killed her, all but literally killed her, and it basically had the same ending where they had to kill the monkey because it's a rampaging animal that it's not going to be under control, and it's already taken a life essentially. So
was it made fun of on Saturday Night Live?
No, it was, as to my knowledge, they never did. I think it was just it was too solemn of an event for people to actually make light of the situation, because if you look, the woman didn't, the real life woman doesn't look as brutally scarred as the actress in the film. She just kind of looks like her face is a little bit uncanny. It's like you can tell it's skin grafts, but it looks like a normal face. It's not scar tissue, which the woman in the film, I don't know if they just found a woman who was who already had really sad face scars, or if they put a woman under that much makeup. But there
must have been some makeup to it.
It's possible Jordan Peele just found someone who happened to look like that, and just said, "Hey, we're gonna pay you to be on set for one day, and then your character brutally dies," which
Yeah, but the lower half of her face looked like a skeleton, so I'm not sure. I mean, it's possible someone like that exists, but
I mean, there's all sorts of strange medical conditions out there. That's I don't know, but her death is the most depressing thing in that movie. I don't know. It's how much can life screw you over for no reason? But that's just, I don't know. For some reason, that particularly affected me. Just the realization that she didn't deserve that. But Stephen Yeun got a bunch of people killed. He didn't have to do that, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, she was part of the machine. I mean, she was part of the machine of show business.
Another woman to be chewed up and spit out by Hollywood, I guess. Which, well, happy thoughts abound. I mean,
it's interesting to make a critique of the film industry in a movie. I mean, it's been done before, but that's kind of what this is. Is it's almost you're critiquing the thing that you're using to tell your story.
Yeah, my girlfriend said that kind of she thinks that making stories about your own industry is a little bit solipsistic and ego driven, and it's like it's not in this case. It doesn't say nice things. It doesn't. It's basically an expose as far as that sort of commentary goes. It's not singing in the rain.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any other thoughts on Nope then you want to conclude on then? It feels like we've covered a decent amount of it, but beyond just the general weird reaction, and I supposedly I've heard weird things about the box office performance, but I'm sure it's doing okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think I had anything to add. We've done mostly an analysis of what it all means. So
I mean, that's the good part of film criticism. I mean, what else does it say? It's shot on IMAX cameras. It looks really good. The guy that made Interstellar, the guy that shot Interstellar made it. It's gonna look really, really good.
Yeah, the cinematography is good. The music is good. The sound's good. It's high quality. Some people feel differently about the story, but we both liked it. We don't know what it all means, but yeah, I think that covers it.
Well, there you go. Now, I guess that leaves us with the lesser of two evils, or the greater of two evils, the Gray Man, which I don't think you were particularly enthused to talk about before I asked if you wanted to talk about it.
I ended up being glad I watched it, but yeah, I had no plans to. I saw several people, they were very upset that it wasn't being brought to the big, well, it was on the big screen for about a week at Cinemark theaters only, like 2 theater chains, but for the most part, it was going to be wait till Netflix kind of thing. They were very upset, and then like, as soon as they saw the movie, I saw them come on and be like, this movie's terrible, I hate it, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll watch it when it comes to Netflix, but I was just going to get to it when I got to it. But I am always happy to watch anything that you recommend, Tyler, if it's for the podcast.
Okay. So did you, what was your read on it then? Because
my read?
Well, we don't have to go into the themes of this one because
what does it all mean?
Oh yeah,
who is the Gray Man?
Oh, we don't need to pull this magic trick twice. This movie is as deep as a thimble. It's as far as like story goes. It's basically the Bourne Identity again. You know, guy who works for government goes on run from government because government doing bad things, which might sound subversive as a political theme, but it's been done 50 times in the last 20 years because filmmakers don't like the government for various Bush and Trump related reasons.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy that works for a secret organization, and then there's scandals within, and so he has to try to out them, and it has every trope in the book, like star-studded cast. And I think I already mentioned to you, my basic take was I couldn't see any of the fight sequences. It's an action movie where the action is covered under fireworks and balloons. So until the very last action sequence, you couldn't see any of the fight choreography, which is one of the reasons you go to see an action movie. The very last fight was pretty good, but yeah, I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, in my review, I kind of made the note that it feels like every action movie of the past 20 years, but without any of the things, the sharpness that made all those things interesting. Like, it kind of has the same color grading as John Wick, but the action's not as good. It's got the same conspiracy plot of like Mission Impossible Fallout or Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, but the dramatic storytelling isn't that good. It's got the same kind of Bourne Identity-esque ideas, but none of the writing is actually all that interesting, and none of the revelations actually amount to anything. Like when they actually do the scene where they reveal it's like the government secrets, like they pretty much just say it's a flash drive full of government bad things, the bad things the government's been doing, and it just cuts to like B-roll footage of like buildings imploding, and you're just kind of supposed to fill in your head. It's just like, oh, it's the CIA, doing all the bad things the CIA does. I'm like, this doesn't feel very fulfilling. It's not, we didn't just discover the Zapruder tape here. This is like this is very generic as far as this thing goes. And that's kind of the thing that bothered me about the whole experience, is that it's kind of like eating a Ritz cracker. There's no flavor to it. It's just like it's just.
But you put something on the cracker, right? I mean,
no. Well, that's the thing. I don't think the Russo brothers put anything on the cracker. They just, unless you count, Chris Evans' mustache, but that's not. It doesn't make. You can't make a 2-hour movie off of a cute mustache unless you are in fact Kenneth Branagh. So.
I mean, Chris Evans was the most entertaining part of this movie for me, getting to see him be a bad guy. And I get that he's not always the good guy. I still think of him as Captain America. So getting to see him play a sleazebag was fun. And Ryan Gosling's not always great, but then why do I not just watch Drive, again? Because it's the same character.
Oh, yeah.
A stoic guy that has no emotion, and which is what stoic means. So I just kind of repeated myself, but the fact that he's this character that has no emotional affect and does punchlines. So yeah, getting to see him and Chris Evans switch wisecracks. And I did like the last action scene, but that could have been a short, I guess, instead of a whole movie.
Yeah, but the last one, the action scene though, went on for a while. It kind of dragged out a little bit longer than it probably needed to. Other than like the epilogue stuff, but like the big shootout in the mansion was a little bit much. But especially since, like you said, a lot of the action felt like really obscured and unfocused. Well,
I'm talking about them at the water fountain, not the big shootout, but when they were in the maze.
Okay. So
when Chris Evans and Ryan Gosling have their duke out, and they're like, "I think I'm better than you," and she could have shot him, but they decide they're going to have a fight to see which one of them's the best, because machismo.
I mean, as far as that sort of thing goes, I'm always up for a good quiet man brawl, but there's nothing wrong with. Letting two really muscular guys duke it out. It just that's perfectly fine. But
no, it was the best action scene in the movie. That's what I'm saying. But before that, you had everything through the fireworks and the the Russo brothers were doing this directorial thing, which some people do, but every single fight scene has to have a million cuts in it. So you keep cutting every other second. Whereas there's other movies like Eastern Promises and stuff where it's pretty brutal because they stay on, not that they don't cut at all, but you don't need to cut every time someone punches or someone kicks somebody in the face. It's just, you can't see anything.
Well, I'll add that it one of my weird, not really complaints about the film is that this film felt really try-hardy with how expensive all of its action scenes looked. Like, you get every time one of these scenes, like the tram fight or the fireworks fight happened, you can just see Netflix's money burning off screen. Like, you can tell how much insane coordination had to be happening to make all this happen. It was like, oh, there's gonna be fireworks going off all the time in the background while we're shooting this action scene, or they're gonna be fighting in the streets of a European city. And they have to have it all shut down because we're going to blow out the sides of the train cars and we're going to do all this insane stuff. And it's going to be so big, so huge. And I'm like, how did this movie cost $200 million? Why did this movie cost $200 million? Mm-hmm. Like, you didn't need that much money to make this movie. It's two guys running across Europe and trying to chase each other. That's not an Irishman level budget setup. And yet it's like there's so much money burning on screen at all times. Like, did you have any reaction to how it looked in that respect, or?
I don't know. I didn't think it looked that good personally. Like, I didn't, but it did seem crazy that you had this movie that wasn't that great, and it has, like, why do you have this star-studded cast in here? You're completely, Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Anna de Armas. the Duke from Bridgerton. I don't even know what his name was, but it's like, I don't understand why you have this cast. I guess so people will watch it, is the only thing I can think of. But it was completely derivative, just like you said. That doesn't mean it wasn't enjoyable. I had fun watching it. But it is, if you're going to go with tropes, you have to do something different, like a superhero movie with Black characters. Black Panther, 1917 is a World War One movie, but it's all done in one tracking shot. You have to break up the formula with something people have never seen before, to make it stand out. Otherwise, you're just recycling the movie we've already watched, and several movies we've already watched.
Well, I think the problem ultimately comes down to the fact that the Russo brothers' voice is very weak as far as mainstream blockbuster directors go. Did you see Cherry last year? The Apple TV Plus? I did, and when I wrote my review of The Gray Man, I compared it a lot to Cherry, because I saw that movie and I suddenly, in like the entire Russo brothers filmography, just like clicked into my head. I was like, okay, I suddenly understand these people as directors, and that they have nothing to say. They have so much clout and so much directorial talent as far as like visual filmmaking goes, and they have so much prestige because they are the directors of the Avengers Endgame, and they have and there's like all this goodwill behind them, and they can do whatever the heck they want. And then they turn around after Avengers Endgame and they make this small budget, probably like $20-30 million movie, and it's got Tom Holland, and it's got all these like sweeping shots that look like they're from an Avengers movie, and all these like huge edits and big moments, and I'm just watching it and I'm like, this movie is about nothing. It's a 2-hour movie about just one guy's life, and there's no consistent thread through it that I can actually draw from beginning to end, because they don't ultimately have any sort of takeaway from this guy's life. They just found a book about this kid who was a soldier during the War on Terror, and then he came home and got addicted to opioids, and they're gonna we're gonna turn it into a 5-act drama, like this crime epic about like the people being swept up in the events of the 2000s. Like, there's one scene where they go to a bank, and you look at the bank title and it says "Evil Bank" on the front doorstep as like a joke, and I'm like, that feels like a really bold creative decision in a more interesting movie. But here it's like, this is like one joke and it's never referenced again. It's like, what is the connective thread between all these things other than just saying the early 2000s sucked? Which, as far as themes goes, that's not bad, but when I seeing that movie, it made me realize, for everything the Russo brothers could do when they're handed a Marvel movie, they just don't have anything else to say. They're just really competent technical directors, except their color grading looks awful, which, that's stretched into Gray Man too, because the whole film looked like it was shot in a parking lot again. But it's like,
and they also did Extraction. Did you see that one? That's another action movie.
They didn't direct it, but they produced it. So I think that was more or less a favor done to one of their colleagues. Just like, oh, we're gonna take our second unit director and give him a director.
One of them was the writers. Joe Russo was a writer on it, and they were the producers. Yes.
Yeah, it was fine for what it was, but it felt like a nepotism job. It's like, we're gonna give one of our buddies an action movie on Netflix and help him get an opportunity going. But no one remembers Extraction a year later. It was,
yeah. I was looking up what they'd done before, which I know their name, but I can't say that I know.
I mean, their big claim to fame was that they were the guys who did Arrested Development and Community back in the early 2010s, which those are great friggin' shows. So nothing wrong with that. The problem is just that everything they've done since then, it's kind of been flavorless. I mean, I like their Marvel movies, but they kind of got really good at doing the bland Marvel aesthetic, where it's exactly audience specific, and the you know, it's the feel people like that they don't find off-putting, but it doesn't do anything outside of that. And when you apply that aesthetic to any movie other than Avengers Infinity War, suddenly you realize, oh, they don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you don't need an action movie to say something. You just need it to be tightly wound and stylish and interesting, and it just didn't have that. It felt like they needed to focus on something, but they just kind of did the same process they did with every other movie they do. So it just has this kind of overt slickness to it, but nothing else to offer, which kind of bothered me more than it probably should have. But
Well, I think the reason you wanted us to talk about this movie was not because you had so much to say about the Gray Man, but you wanted to talk about why it's important for people to have a unique voice or something to say, or a good story. So
yeah,
you know, what do you want to say to our filmmakers out there, Tyler?
Have a point. Like, you know, as much as we don't like Joss Whedon anymore, at least that first Avengers movie was witty. Like the plot's not important and the characters aren't like super deep, but I go back and watch that first film and it's still as infectious as it ever was, because that guy really knows how to do film dialogue and comedy and making something fun, and you know, he has a voice. Like that's really the bottom line is, I want filmmakers to have a voice. It's not like I'm not going to be the snooty film critic that says that action movies aren't valuable. I just want action movies from people that have a voice. And when I see movies from people that don't have a voice, it's incredibly tedious to watch. And like that's kind of the experience I had coming out of The Gray Man, was like, you know, it's perfectly fine to watch once and then never to think about again. But you know, people aren't going to talk about it.
What do you mean by having a voice? Like, what does that mean to you?
Interesting epistemological dungeon. It's more than just having something to say, because, you know, Martin Scorsese has a voice, but not every single one of his films says the same thing. And we don't need a Marvel movie to be a Scorsese film. It just needs to be its own thing. But I guess like James Gunn is a good comparison, because he has such a specific mindset, and you can always tell when it's his writing and his ideas, where there's this kind of sense of flavor and bitterness underneath everything, where these characters are laughing through their pain, and it captures this kind of sense that these are struggling people who are going through real life things, even though they're in this very, you know, out there fantasy world. Or, you know, something like Lord of the Rings, where, you know, it's a Tolkien book, but the Peter Jackson films are Peter Jackson, and you can see the same kind of fetishes and aesthetic flourishes that you see in Dead Alive and Meet the Feebles and all these like older horror, like low budget horror movies, because he's a director who loves just kind of like shock and cheap gore and silly things, but it's wrapped up in this very sincere plot, and it just melds so well in that particular movie. So I don't know how to describe voice in terms of just like a thing. I think it's just having some level of flavor or humanity underneath the dialogue and the technical skills, because again, it doesn't need to be, you know, we don't need Die Hard to be written like Chaucer. We just need to feel like there's something more to this that's even just a little bit deeper, that connects to something. Otherwise, you know, you're stuck in like Taken 3 territory, where nothing matters, nothing functions, and nothing is ever worth watching ever. Or in the case of something like The Gray Man, you know, technically slick, inoffensive, but no one's going to be talking about it this time next month.
Well, I guess I don't know, because the reason I asked the question is because you kept saying you want something that has a voice, and I'm like, well, how does that function for an action movie? And I guess, like, to me, I was just thinking this is the same thing we've seen. And so I mentioned The Duke and Bridgerton. I did watch Bridgerton this year, and not that compares, but it's kind of like a Regency romance, but what made it unique and what got the public's attention was that it had a multiracial cast and it was kind of doing something different with it. And so I don't know that an action movie, I guess I was wondering what voice meant in that context. For me, I just think you need a unique take or something component to come in, and you in some level want to connect with at least universal storylines, if it's not having something to say or some kind of a theme that it touches on, maybe something in the ethos in the air that we're all carrying around. Because you have this character of the gray man, who is, he has like this backstory, and he, you finally find out what it is. But if he's going to be the gray man and have this backstory, you want him to take that into his performance in some way and say, well, because he grew up in this difficult thing with his dad and his brother, like, sorry to spoil everybody, but there's a flashback.
We've already spoiled Nope. What does it matter?
Yeah. But that informed, why he ended up in prison and, theoretically how he interacts with people around him. But you don't really get, that doesn't really play into how they write the character or how he talks. It, they tell you and you're like, oh, okay, well, he has this traumatic backstory, but you don't really see that that's part of why he operates in the world the way he does. And so, that's one thing that's kind of missing. I appreciate, like, I don't know if you saw the documentary about Val Kilmer.
Not yet. I've heard good things though.
Yeah, it's really interesting though, because he was talking about, when he was a big drama geek in high school. And so anytime, no matter how small the part was that he played, he would write pages and pages about this character's life. So, with like the Iceman character in Top Gun, he wrote his own character analysis, and he had that, even though that wasn't part of his lines or anything he was going to be doing, he like carried that around with him and played the role. And I think that shows in his, I don't know how he became so successful, is he wasn't just he wasn't just like delivering lines, or he had his own motivation and stuff that he was working with. And we know that Ryan Gosling's a very talented actor, but sometimes it's the actor, sometimes it's the director, if they don't like pull it out, if they're just like, hey guys, we're gonna have a grand old time making this action movie, they're not gonna use craft in making it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when it comes to like an action movie, craft is a lot of the story. A lot of what you're trying to accomplish is just kind of putting that energy and tension and motivation on screen, where you don't, like something like the Raid Redemption, you don't need a particularly complicated motivation for your character other than just he's a good cop who's trying to not be a bad cop. And that works in the context because you kind of see, okay, he's got a family. He's when push comes to shove, he'll do the right thing. And it's enough that you get by on just the fact that, you want to root for this guy. And when I mean something like flavor in regards to action movie, you can like look at just like the bad Marvel movies compared to the good Marvel movies. Like, if you see like one of the bad Thor movies, there's no taste to it. Like Thor: The Dark World, it's like it's a film that was clearly created in a lab with a vial. Like there's no authenticity to it. There's no emotion behind it. It's like corporate. And then you plug Taika Waititi in, and suddenly it just begins this vibrancy and this witty dialogue and this color and this desire to kind of explore new ideas and new realms, and to have this really subversive political subtext to it. Like do you see what I mean? Where it's like it's not, they didn't radically change the formula. They just they plugged in a little humanity, and suddenly it just comes to life. Like that to me that's the voice. It's not just obviously when it comes to, you know, an action film, the movies I would compare something like The Gray Man to are stuff like, you know, John Wick. And John Wick doesn't have a particularly loud voice, but it's, as far as action movies go, you kind of understand the director and what he's interested in and what drives his passions, and this very deep fascination with lore and like creating a world that's deeper than this character, and just plopping this very interesting, chaotic, unstoppable character right in the middle of it, and watching just the, you know, the Rube Goldberg machine like start spinning around it. So, you know, in that case, it's like I don't know what would have made The Gray Man better to me. I mean, I could just say like a better script, or like you said, a deeper level of interaction with the actors, where you draw more out of Ryan Gosling, because he's a great actor. He's a great actor, but he needs a really interesting director to kind of draw out these deeper, complex ideas that you get in films like Drive or Blade Runner 2049 or Barbie. And you need to or The Nice Guys is a good version of that, because The Nice Guys is like completely different than a lot of those other performances, where he's just doing you know, old-fashioned stumbling comedy. If it kind of falls back to the problem of like vision, and the problem of not having a complete sense of what you're doing or what you're trying to accomplish. I don't know if the Russo brothers approached their film with a deep idea of who Sierra 6 was as a person. They have these little snippets of ideas, like we see the scene where he's bonding with a teenage girl, and we see the scene where he's like we get his character motivation where he explains what his background is, but like I never really get a sense of why he's so deeply driven to reveal the truth when he could just so easily obey his bosses and not question anything, and then nothing matters. And then he's, you know, just keeps he's I see no reason why someone with his background shouldn't just be part of the machine. And instead they don't really delve deep into that core motivating aspect of, okay, why is it that, you know, injustice bothers you so deeply? What is it that drives a person to go this far out of the way to make himself an enemy of the state just to, you know, see the truth be brought out there? And without that, you just kind of get Drive Man, but have that character doing a James Bond impression, which doesn't work all that well. Like, it works enough that you don't notice it unless you're thinking about it, but it's like there's this almost like uncanny valley-ness to it that's like doesn't make it stick at all.
Yeah. Well, thank you for expanding on those ideas.
I'm sorry if this
No. I just wanted to hear more about what you meant, because I was like, oh, we're just ranting about how bad it is, and I was like, we should say, well, what would have made it better, you know?
Yeah,
positive.
It definitely felt like I had something that was trying to get out that was bothering me, but it's hard to describe, because you know, middling films are the hardest ones to actually get to the core of in terms of like what makes them frustrating. Because, you know, you watch The Room and everything that's bad for it is like right there. You don't have to explain why The Room is bad. But, you know, you watch a movie like Extraction and you're like, you know, it's fine in the moment, but then you don't know how to explain a year later why no one thinks about Extraction anymore. And that's the quality I'm trying to get to with The Gray Man, where, you know, I want this to be more than it is. I want the Russo brothers to be the same guys who made the Modern Warfare episode of Community, which is probably their greatest creation, and I will always love the fact that they did that. But, you know, the fact that they come off as so like journeymen in their instincts that I don't know if they're ever gonna, unless someone hands them a really good script and they just really dig into it, I don't know if we'll ever get something that's particularly super complex or interesting from them. And that's sad, because these are the most financially successful directors in history. And, you know, you kind of want them to be a little bit more, you know, to use that title and do something crazy. Like, the one thing I'll give them a lot of credit. They were the executive producers for Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is very weird, but I love the fact that they put their name behind that movie because it gives it a little more attention. It's like, oh, from the producers of Avengers: Infinity War, the weirdest freaking movie you'll see all year. Like that's I genuinely hope someone said, oh, it's gonna be like Avengers, and then just walked blind into everything everywhere all at once. That would be the greatest thing in the world if that someone actually did that. But I don't want them to just kind of like languish and not figure out what they're trying to do, especially when they have the biggest microphone on the planet and they can convince Netflix to make the most expensive movie they've ever made. Like that's insane that they could actually get that done. And it's hard to talk about directors who don't have their identity or core emotional motivation worked out. And it's probably gonna sound like I'm being nitpicky and dumb and like annoying for no reason. I'm like, this is just my hang up. I don't know why. And
no, you should ask for what you want, otherwise it'll never happen. You have to ask for what you want. I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell, to be honest. When I watched Extraction, I remember I really enjoyed that movie. Did I know it was mediocre at the time? No, I was just, what year did that one come out? It came out in 2020. Okay, so this is during the pandemic, and I was like, I'm glad I can watch an action movie at home since the theaters were closed. And sometimes it's not until the test of time, when you go past it, that you realize, oh, it wasn't that great, was it? But at the time it just seemed fun. And maybe that's what, if they are making money without making creative movies, there's no reason they should have to do any more, and they'll just stay in the mediocre lane, and then you'll have more things to talk about on your podcast.
That's not the stuff I like talking about, though. Like
yeah,
I'd rather talk about how Mad Max Fury Road is still a great film after 7 years, and it's still totally watchable, or how The Matrix is still a good movie, or The Dark Knight is still a good movie, because there's this continuity where they hit something, and they hit something essential, and they did it perfectly, and it's like we're gonna talk about these films for the rest of our lives. And that's a good thing, and that's what filmmakers should be aiming for. And it's not even because, it's not even because they hit high art status. It's just because they did the thing perfectly. Mad Max Fury Road is not an art film, but it's.
Well, why aren't we talking about that then?
Well, because it's not trending right now. That's why. I didn't say I wasn't mercenary. I have to follow the trending tabs too, and the value in talking about this is to encourage people that have money and power to think an extra layer and do an extra script pass, and just remember, like, everything you put out there is going to have your name on it forever, and it's never going to go away, no matter how hard you try. And you have to remember that. That's why careers are made and destroyed in an instant by really good or really bad films. Or in this case, it's probably just going to be, perfectly fine until they decide to go back to Marvel and make whatever the next thing they're going to do is. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, we've successfully exercised that demon. Do we have any? Do you have anything you want to add? I hope I haven't been lording over this discussion too much with my quibbles.
No, I have nothing else I want to say about The Gray Man. Thank you. I mean, it's like, that was fun. Thanks for letting me watch it. Thank you for making me watch this movie, Tyler. But I mean, I'm always, like I said, I thought it was fun. Didn't think it was particularly creative, and annoyed me that I couldn't see anything through the balloons, but
oh yeah,
other than that.
Yeah, that's my last word on The Gray Man is it's fine. 6 out of 10. You'll enjoy it. Go have a nice date night. So, that's all there's to say. Like, there's not much to add. But I guess just to close out, do you want to plug your stuff or?
Sure. Well, you can find me at One of My Stories. My website is oneofmystories.com. That is the number 1. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram at One of My Stories. and I review all kinds of things, do occasional videos. And this weekend, I'm going to be at GalaxyCon talking about how superheroes save comics and the future of genre fiction are the two topics. So I'm excited about that. Occasionally, I get to do public speaking and panels. And this is my first panel this year, so that'll be exciting. I
was just looking through her blog before we started talking, and I noticed your RRR review went up. You want to talk about a movie with voice? That's one worth discussing right there, as a movie that has something to say. But no time for that. But definitely, go support her. Go check out her panel if you happen to be in the Durham area. But thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to our next spoiler discussion where I'll mercilessly bully something else. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Tyler.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night.
The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions and cultural review podcast. Editing, hosting, and producing are by Tyler Hummel, art by Crystal Cowley, and original music is composed by Guap Squad Gang and Melissa Lafira. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment below and tell us anyone you think would be a good guest for the show. Thank you for listening.